Well, good morning and welcome to the Center for Spiritual Living, Texas Hill Country. I am Beth Warren, the Senior Minister here at CSL, and I will be facilitating the lesson today. And our theme this month has been 28 Days of Transformation. You know what? We're halfway there. The first week, of course, we spent clearing away the debris that keeps us separate from who we really are. The clutter of things, the resentment, the hurts, the anger, anything that we know deep down that is creating a block in the flow of life in and as and through us. And this was external as well as internal work. We also know that this is not just 1 week's work. However, we entered into it in a focused way in week 1 and with the intention to keep clear by having a daily forgiveness practice. And that was how we did our clearing. And then we moved from clearing into a calling, realizing that we are all called for something bigger than we thought. Not bigger necessarily in the way that the world sees it, but bigger in the way it gives us meaning and purpose and aliveness. And it usually affects us in the way of having a longing for something or a discontent for something in our lives. It is how the calling expresses itself. And we see a beautiful sample of this in the life of the master teacher Jesus, when he was in the temple astounding those who had been teaching for years. You remember he was 12 years old, and when his parents, who had lost him for a while, they were at a gathering, they came looking for him, and they said something to the effect of, "There you are, what are you doing here and not with us?" And he said, "Know ye not that I must be about my Father's business?" And don't you know, there is a call in me that is different from what you think it should be. He was in his spiritual adolescence, I would say. And we have a spiritual adolescent shift when we begin to be aware that we are called for something different than the things we may have thought. We are called to bring real meaning and purpose to life. So our work last Sunday and all this past week was to deepen into that understanding of what is currently called us as we creatively align with love's learning, and which was our acronym for call, if you remember. So that's where we've been. Now today, we are going to talk about a place we sometimes arrive at as transformations begin to happen in us. As we experience the newness of a transformed life, we may not be completely comfortable in our own skin and in the way things are doing. And we may not yet quite know how to navigate life in this new way. And you're tempted maybe to go back to the old way of being. And as I was preparing this lesson, I wanted to give a perspective maybe from which we could understand this time of transition when we're moving from one way of life to another. And I wanted to provide a framework for understanding this seeming gap between living from who we thought we were to living from who we really are. And to learn who we are without our story or without our history, and to live from the powerful expression of God that we are. We learn a lot from our sports teams about management. I know when I was taking the MBA program, we used sports teams or sports coaches in a lot of cases. But in this case, it's about managing transition. For 8 years, Steve Nash played for the Phoenix Suns, and then in a moment, he was traded to another team. Suddenly, he is no longer a Suns, rather he is a Laker. For 8 years, he had worn purple and orange uniform, and he knows all the plays, he knows the players and their families, he knows the playbook, he knows the back roads of Phoenix, he knows how to get to the arena, he has keys to get into the deepest places of the arena. He knows all the best restaurants in town, and he owns a home here. He was a Phoenix Suns, tried and true, and suddenly a transformation has taken place, and he's a Los Angeles Laker. Imagine what it takes to have to go from thinking I'm a Phoenix Sun to I'm an LA Laker. What must be done? And as you and I think about this, it has some references to what it means for us when we recognize a transformation has occurred. I'm not who I thought I was. I was playing a role separate from God. I was playing the role that there is something wrong with me. I was playing the role that I don't have all it takes. I was playing the role that I need to get my love or security out there. And I was playing the role of being small. I was playing this role separate from God. You know, we say we create our own reality either by design or by default. And when you're doing it by design, that's when you feel these feelings in transformation, and oftentimes are tempted to go back to your old way of being. So I'm putting it in spiritual terms, though, for you to hopefully understand. But then we have a realization and a transformation takes place, and we begin to realize that we are not who we thought we are. We are not that role. We are a new being. It takes a while to catch up to that. You don't know all the back roads here. You haven't read the playbook yet. You don't know which the right key is, and you don't know what unlocks what. But if you are Steve Nash, you don't come out on game day in LA and sit on the bench and say, I don't really feel like a Laker yet. I still feel like a Sun. So I can't really play today. Maybe someday I'll feel like a Laker and I'll play then, but I can't play today. There is no therapist on the bench who's going to help Steve Nash feel like a Laker. He just has to be one. He has to suit up and show up. He has to put on the uniform, and there's something very empowering about that concept. And I want to say it again. He just has to suit up and show up. You don't have to wait for your feelings to catch up for you to go and do the thing you're here to do. You just assume you can. You just put on the gear, and it really isn't different from what you've been wearing. It just has a different image in it. You put it on because you step into it. You don't wait until you feel like it. You get a new perspective about it. And it really is all about putting things in perspective. And let me tell you this story just to illustrate it. A young woman went off to college, and after being there a couple of semesters, she wrote her parents this letter. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm sorry I haven't written lately, but all my things were destroyed in the dorm fire. My eyes are almost completely healed now, and the doctor assures me that my lungs aren't permanently damaged from the smoke. While the dorm is being rebuilt, I have moved in with my boyfriend. I think you met Roy when you were down for Parents Weekend. He's the one with the green hair and safety pins in his nose. I know how much you've always wanted grandchildren, so you'll be happy to know I'm expecting a baby by the end of the summer. Then the letter goes on. You'll also be happy to know that there was no fire in the dorm. My eyes are not damaged and my lungs are fine. I'm not living with Roy, who's not even my boyfriend, and I am definitely not pregnant. I did, however, receive a D in English and an F in French, and I wanted to be sure you placed this information in the proper perspective. I think you've probably heard that story before. I know it's been told by many ministers in different pulpits, but put it in perspective. So what does it mean to put things in the proper perspective? Well, in the New Testament, we find Paul writing about what proper perspective is, and he calls it the mind of Christ. In Philippians 2, verse 5, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. And Ernest Holmes writes about it in the Science of Mind textbook when he said, St. Paul said, we have the mind of Christ, which means that each one of us has immediate access to the intelligence of the universe. Proper perspective is to put on this mind and to realize and therefore gain access to the intelligence and the power and the creativity and the love of the universe. And what happens when we do this? Well, here's a tangible example. On the Sea of Galilee, the waves are boisterous and the disciples are terrified, yet Jesus is asleep in the bottom of the boat. And they woke him up. And I don't know about you, but I'm not my sharpest when I first wake up. And yet, Jesus walks to the end of the boat and says, peace, be still, and everything calms down. And they say, who is this man? That even as he first wakes up, the winds and the waves obey his command. The Christ mind, the perspective we have on life, is a way of orienting yourself to that when your daughter sends you a letter that says D and F, and without hearing those other things, which are not even real, it's held in context, in a perspective. Let's deal with the D and F, but they are just circumstances. The mind of Christ in New Thought terms, we would say something like it's right thinking, says to those winds and those waves, peace, be still. And you put on the mantle, you put on the uniform, because it has been given to you by the one who has given you life. And how do you know? Are you breathing? If you're breathing, it has been given to you. You have been given the Holy Spirit of life, and so it is putting on the mind of Christ. Right thinking. And what does it take to put on the mind of Christ? What does it take for Steve Nash to say, I'm not a Suns, I'm a Laker? And what it takes to show up as a Laker. To renew the mind again and again and again. And once again, Paul comes to the rescue with some wonderful counsel. In Philippians 4, verse 8, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, and whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. We put on the mind of Christ by thinking that which is true and noble and good and praiseworthy. And if our thoughts move to things that are not, we say no to those thoughts. We always look for the good in all things. We practice putting the mind of Christ, and this, friends, is how we navigate our transformation. By putting on the mind of Christ and thinking anew. And last week, we were to spend time inviting forth the call. And now, in the peace and beauty and sanctity of this room, where you are, I invite you to take one of those ideas and put it on. If you're going to, if your new idea is to, your intention is to spread love, and to come from a vibration of love, do that. And put on the uniform of that call by visualizing yourself being that person. In other words, see yourself being a closer friend to whomever you chose to be, that your intention was to be a closer friend. Or see yourself bringing light everywhere you go. Or see yourself learning a new skill. Or see a relationship healed. You're designing your reality, and as if it is in the now. See it, feel it, and live it. Make it real, oh so very real. And this is how you navigate the gap between here and there. And in that process, there's one other thing to do, and that is simply to stand and trust the divine flow of life in, as, and through you to be your support, to be your anchor, and to be your foundation. Just stand in that. So we're going to add affirmations to our forgiveness practice this week by declaring in your affirmations, I am a better friend. I am learning, I have learned a new skill, or I am, whatever your affirmation is, I am now a skilled speaker and I radiate love. And with that, I would say, and so it is, and happy Thanksgiving.